Deres Majesteter, Eksellenser, mine damer og herrer. På vegne av den norske Nobelkomité ønsker jeg alle hjertelig velkommen til dette års fredsprisutdeling. Det er i dag på dagen 100 år siden Alfred Nobel døde. Han hadde året før utferdiget sitt testamente, der han hadde bestemt at hans store formue skulle bruke en priset. Peace Prize Laureate of 1996, Carlos Filipe Ximenes Belo, to come forward to receive the gold medal and the diploma. I now call upon the Nobel Peace Prize Laureate of 1996, José Ramos Horta, to come forward to receive the gold medal and the diploma. Carlos Filipe Ximenes Belo will now present his Nobel lecture. Please.
Your Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, nations will proclaim his wisdom, the assembly will celebrate his praises. If he lives long, his name will be more glorious than 1,000 others, and if he dies, that will satisfy him rest as well. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I start with this biblical passage from the Book of Wisdom because it expresses with deep significance the memory of a man we remember this day whose esteemed peace prize bears his name. Today, the 10th of December, we celebrate the centennial anniversary of the death of a wise benefactor of humanity, a peace worker, Alfred Nobel. What reasons brought the Catholic Bishop of East Timor to be here in the presence of his assembly? I come from a social context that is already known to your excellencies, where due to circumstances, the aspirations, the desires of the people are limited. Taking the words from Terentius, homo sum humani nihil me alienum puto. As a man, as human being, I cannot stay indifferent in front of what concerns man. As a member of a people, I have to share the destiny of the people, taking upon myself completely this mandate, knowing the risks that such attitude will involve. Striving for the defense of the rights of all peoples is not only the privilege of those guiding the destiny of the people or those enjoying lofty positions in society, but is the duty of everyone, whatever rank or status. As a member of the Church, I take it upon myself the mission of enlightening and denouncing all human situations which are disagreement with the Christian concept and contrary to the teaching of the Church concerning all mankind. The Catholic Bishop is a pastor of part of God's people. His specific mission is spiritual. Such mission is incumbent upon him basically as dispenser of spiritual resources for the salvation of a person and consolidating them in faith in Jesus Christ. It is known to your excellencies the effort of the Church concerning the suffering of the people of East Timor over the last 21 years. As Bishop of this people, I regard the Nobel Peace Prize not as something to merely esteem one person, but as a rightful homage for the work done by the Catholic Church in East Timor, defending the inalienable rights of her people. Yet you have made him little less than a good God. You have crowned him with glory and beauty. For the composer of this psalm, human dignity is taking root in his divine vocation created by God. Your Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am profoundly honored to be before you today to receive the Nobel Prize for Peace. But whatever personal compliment I may receive, I believe that I have received this high tribute not because of who I am or what I have done. I firmly believe that I am here essentially as the voice of the voiceless people of East Timor, who are with me today in spirit, if not in person. And what the people want is peace and end to violence and respect for their human rights. It is my fervent hope that the 1996 Nobel Prize for Peace will advance these goals. Above all else, I am mindful and humble in my thoughts of Pope John Paul II, who did so much in the face of overwhelming odds in epochal struggle to remove the yoke of communism from Poland and other nations who have been told to be realistic and accepted their fate. The Holy Father has provided an example and a depth of inspiration to me that can never be equaled. My gratitude to John Paul II cannot be adequately expressed. I also think of others, especially from Asia, who have never stood here. I contemplate with unending amazement the work of Mahatma Gandhi and his creed of nonviolence in the movement of change. I think of China, and I pray for the well-being of Mr. Wei Jinshen and his colleagues, and hope that will soon be liberated from their jail cells, just as the Indonesian leaders once were freed from the infamous Bovendigul prison after long years of cruel captivity. Surely, these same Indonesian leaders had earned a place here in Oslo even before I was born in 1948, at the height of their battle for freedom and dignity. I think of the fearless Indonesian fighters, and I realize that the history has so much to teach us if we would only take time to contemplate its richness. I stand humbled in the august presence of my predecessor in this place in Oslo. I think of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., standing in the mountaintop looking out at the promised land. These words remind me of the view of the majestic mountains in my beloved East Timor, Mount Matabian, the Mount of the Dead, near where I was born in the east, and Mount Ramelau in the west. As I look at these mountains in my frequent journeys throughout my native land, I feel ever more strongly that it is high time that the guns of war are silenced in East Timor. And once and forever, it is high time that tranquility is returned to the lives of people of my homeland. It is high time that there be authentic dialogue. All people of goodwill must use every peaceful means of human ingenuity and intelligence to find ways to create a genuine peace based on mutual respect and human dignity. East Timor is hardly alone in its search for peace and dignity, and it is of great importance to acknowledge the work of others. Last year in Belfast, Northern Ireland, of the 1976 Scholar Award Mrs. Mary Corrigan Maguire, whose increasing work for peace has touched many throughout the world. Mrs. Maguire graciously gave me an informative and moving tour to travel areas in Belfast, the night after many vehicles had been burned in protest of the early release of a soldier convinced of killing an 18-year-old girl. I pray the people of Northern Ireland may know genuine peace, justice, and tranquility in the near future. Last year, I met with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and was deeply moved by his wisdom and kindness. The people of Tibet are never far from my prayers, nor are the communities of the indigenous peoples of the world who are increasingly being overwhelmed by aggressive modernity that presumes to call itself civilization. I pray for peace in the Middle East, for peace with justice for Israelis and Palestinians, Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike in the Holy Land, with dignity and tolerance for all. I pray for peace in Afghanistan, which cannot be forgotten, and for the continuation of the peace process in Central America, and for those in nearby Chiapas. And no human being can be indifferent to the drama in the Great Lakes area, in Burundi and Rwanda, and also Zaire, where the human suffering cries out for a solution. The situation of endless tension in Sudan also deserves a major attention. In South Africa, the search for peace deepens. For me, the work of Archbishop Desmond Tutu is a shining example of the way truth can be combined with the quest for human rights, the way humor and humility can be mixed with righteousness. and I only pray that I may be worthy of his mantle. In Burma, I salute the strength and grace of Aung San Suu Kyi and pray that a better day may soon arrive for her and all her people. May the beauty of music from her piano soften the hearts of armies and nations. In Burma and throughout the world, in places known and not well known, let us apply the words in the 5th chapter of Amos of the Old Testament. Let justice roll down like waters. Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and let us always think of many anonymous people throughout the world struggling for the protection of human rights. Day by day, work to convince the international community of the justice of their cause, whether they be Muslims or Christians, Protestants or Catholics, Hindus or Buddhists, whatever they be, followers of all age-old traditional beliefs, believers or not believers. I say, press on, take courage, remain true to your ideals. You will not be forgotten. The world censors those who take up arms to defend their causes and call on them to use non-violence means in voicing their grievances. But when a people chooses the violence path, it is all too often the case that hardly anyone pays attention. It is tragic that people have to suffer and die, and the television cameras have to deliver the picture to people's homes every day before the world at large admits there is a problem. Therein lies the focus on East Timor this year. It represents the extraordinary recognition of East Timor's quest for peace and the recognition for its pleas for an end to suffering. I speak of these things as one who has the responsibility to bear witness to what I have seen and heard, to react to what I know to be true, to keep the flame of hope alive, to do what is possible to warm the earth for still another day. I speak as a spiritual leader, not as politician, which in fact I am not. In recent weeks, some articles have described me as a former shepherd, not realizing that my vocation only involved from a boyhood job of tending water buffaloes to the grave responsibility of trying to apply my fallible self to the difficult task of providing moral leadership in a situation where almost no one is ever completely happy with my actions. Others have written that if there had not been a war in East Timor, I would be spending all my time tending to the needs of troubled youth, which is the special calling for my religious orders, the Salesians of St. John Bosco. But this is only a matter of degree. Even now, I spend an overwhelming amount of energy in listening to and counsel the youth of East Timor who urgently need such help because of their history. This is my special obligation and one which I welcome. Thus I must press on, aware of all the tasks that are far from complete. St. John Bosco once said that we will have the chance to rest in the hereafter, not in this world. And my life in the past 13 years, since I took up the post in East Timor, illustrates the accuracy of Don Bosco's judgment in this regard, among others. But my own hard work forms only a small part of what is necessary. The participation of others is vital. I extend the hand of friendship and goodwill to all those who provide genuine assistance and moral support in the vital struggle for peace in East Timor, throughout Asia, Africa, in the Western Hemisphere, throughout Europe, in Bosnia, and elsewhere in Balkans, everywhere. I must also praise the United Nations for its painstaking efforts on the question of East Timor, which have been of central importance in keeping the issue alive over many long years. In face of great obstacles, in spite of all the difficulties, the United Nations have continued to preserve in the interest of generating dialogue that might one day create a lasting structure of peace in East Timor and in many other places throughout the world. There is no institution that can take the place of the United Nations, especially in the light of the history and credibility of the world organizations. We cannot overlook the fact that the United Nations played an important role from its earliest days in the 1940s in assisting the struggle of Indonesia's nationalist movement. The young Indonesian Republic fought alone with supreme courage against the brute force of colonialism and its allies, ultimately receiving the indispensable moral weight of the United Nations. The Dutch and their allies could not carry on military operations with impunity, as other colonial powers did before the United Nations was formed in 1945. This must never be forgotten. Thus, the world must do whatever possible to strengthen the United Nations in the months and the years ahead in the deep interest of all the peoples of the world. Your Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let it be stated clearly that to make peace a reality, we must be flexible as well as wise. We must truly recognize our faults and move to change ourselves in interest of making peace rule. Let us banish anger and hostility, vengeance and other dark emotions, and transform ourselves into humble. East Timor are not uncompromising. They are not unwillingly to forgive and overcome their bitterness. On the contrary, they yearn for peace, peace within their community and peace in their region. They wish to build bridges with their Indonesian brothers and sisters to find ways of creating harmony and tolerance. Mutual respect in the basis of compromise. Let us start by making a sincere effort to change the very serious human rights situation in East Timor. The Church has played its part. We have formed a Justice and Peace Commission that is always ready to cooperate with the authorities to address problems. Independent human rights officials have repeatedly visited East Timor and have recommended what needs to be done. As a first step, the release of East Timor political prisoners has to be given urgent attention in accordance with the section of humanitarianism in the Pancasila, the principles of Indonesian state ideology. Such a step would help create an important opening on the road of peace. Ladies and gentlemen, East Timor was given the possibility to be heard through the voice of her two sons, resounded throughout the world through this solemn assembly. But I would like that this attention shown by the world to East Timor be given the same intensity concerning the many other problems distressing other people. There are similar situations throughout the world where people live under horrible conditions as in Timor, but they have no possibility to be here. Daily we get in our home news and images of suffering, pain, destruction caused by war. War, this monster, as Father Antônio Vieira, a Portuguese missionary in Brazil, states, what war is doing, even God is not secure in the altar. I appeal to all men of goodwill, in particular those holding power, to find out solutions for these numberless conflicts, solutions based on justice and solidarity in order to the fundamental rights would be respected. I would like, before I finish, to address one word to the youth around the world. particularly to the youth of my dear Timor. Society is a succession of interwoven rings in which each generation has the duty to contribute to the next generation in order to live in the world peacefully, fraternally. Under your shoulders, dear young people of the entire world, weigh the responsibility to transform tomorrow's world into a society where peace, harmony, and fraternity reign. Dear youth, I quote from memory the great Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore, "Youth as a lotus flower flourishes just once alive." Finally, an event is never lonely action. The award for the Nobel Peace Prize to these two sons of Timor, Dr. José Ramos Horta and myself, has come about because many people, groups, and institutions have worked hard so that this event be a reality. In this moment, I'd like, in the first place, to thank their majesties for being susceptible with the suffering of the people of East Timor and for the generous presence in this solemn assembly. My thanks goes to the Nobel Peace Prize Committee for their kind attention and the courageous dedication on behalf of the plight of the East Timorese. To the government and the members of the Norwegian Parliament, I thank you for the decision to honor us with Nobel Peace Prize. I thank the Portuguese President, the Portuguese government, especially the old people of Portugal and other friendly nations, as well as distinguished personalities who have proposed our names as candidates for the Nobel Peace Prize. To the Timorese here and abroad, I convey my indescribable gratitude and my communion and silent solidarity with you. To His Holiness Pope John Paul II, who has been persistent and attentive in following the situation and the suffering of the people and the church in East Timor, I submit my filial devotion and the promise of unending fidelity and the union with Christ. To the Pontifical Commission of Justice and Peace, particularly in the person of its President, His Eminence Cardinal Roger Echegaray, who had the opportunity to be in direct contact with the Church of Timor, I submit my deep gratitude. I cannot forget the contribution of friends from other religions, Christian denominations, with discretion and fearless activity have made it possible that the Nobel Peace Prize for 1996 be attributed to the Catholic Church in East Timor. I would be unjust to forget, although I am aware that it's difficult to count the various non-government organizations, humanitarian groups, church-related groups, and individuals who have worked hard in silence and without much publicity so that the Timorese can receive assistance and that the Timorese issue would not be buried under the dust of oblivion. With them, I share my happiness. The Creator and Father of everything and all peoples will reward all of us and will give us strength, wisdom, and courage to struggle for our fellow human beings, because each one is the image and the likeness of God. Thank you.
José Ramos Horta will now present his Nobel lecture. Please.
Suas Majestades, honoráveis membros do Comitê Nobel de Paz, senhores presidentes, primeiros ministros e excelências. Com vossa permissão, as minhas primeiras palavras serão na língua de Camões. Fernando Pessoa, apenas por razões práticas, vou continuar a minha intervenção na língua inglesa. I will now resume my speech in English. Your Majesties, honorable members of the Nobel Committee, my deepest appreciation goes to the Nobel Committee for having chosen us for the 96th Nobel Peace Prize. Your generosity in thinking of the wretch of the earth and your courage in standing up to the might of states, the cynicism and the indifference of too many, betrayal by some, tells us a lot, not only about the soul and history of courage of this great country of yours that fought so bravely during World War II. In recent years, Norway has played a central role in fostering dialogue and peace among historical enemies. In the Middle East and Guatemala, your discreet nature, determination and creativity have proven that some of the world's seemingly intractable conflicts can be resolved when there is an honest mediator and when the parties in a conflict are willing to end the war. The real winner of the 96th Nobel Peace Prize is our spiritual leader, Don Carlos Filipe Ximenes Belo. He is the embodiment of the East Timorese people's resilience, moral rectitude, dignity and identity, and his long quest for peace and freedom. In Don Carlos, the people of East Timor have found spiritual comfort and some sense of security from the daily threats to their very existence. My share of the Nobel Peace Prize will go entirely to a foundation to be called Peace and Democracy, Don Martinho da Costa Lopes. I know this is too small a tribute to this great man who gave his life to his church and his people. With the men, women and children in many parts of the world who have given us so many years of their lives, I wish to share this moment of joy. Without the generous solidarity movement, we would have been poorer and alone. Some of our good friends have passed away from this earth. Dennis Freeney, Michel Tanner, Michel Robert, Carlos Villares, and the little and beautiful Sarah Taylor, whom God took away at age 15. We will remember them forever. My special greetings of friendship and eternal gratitude to my good friend, President Joaquim Chissano of Mozambique, and to President Nino Vieira of Guinea-Bissau, for having taken the trouble to fly all the way to Oslo to be with us. My special greetings and the deepest gratitude to President José Eduardo Santos, Mascarenhas Monteiro of Cape Verde, Miguel Trovado of São Tomé, for their friendship and generosity. You have been with us in our most lonely years, when the rest of the world pretended we did not exist, or even offered us advice on how best to surrender. And from this rostrum, I bow to the late predecessor of President Chissano, Samora Moisés Machel, one of the greatest men Africa has known. Your peoples and countries have been with us through our lonely years, and I believe that you will be with us still in the many years to come. I wish to state also from this august rostrum the eternal gratitude of the people of East Timor and my own to the people of Portugal, the President, our good friend, Dr. Jorge Sampaio, and his predecessors, Dr. Mário Soares and the General Antonio Ramalho Yanes, men of principles and compassion. Through your Excellency, Mr. President, I humbly ask you to convey to your wonderful and generous people, members of Parliament, to our good friend, the Prime Minister, Antonio Guterres, past and present governments, our most heartfelt appreciation for your gallant efforts in support of our struggle. For many years, Portugal fought a lonely battle in the European Union against the indifference and even hostility of some of their own partners. You have shown not only to us, the East Timorese, but to other smaller nations in the world that principles and morality have not been taken over completely by mercantile interests. I recently visited Brazil and was warmly welcomed by everyone. I humbly asked my good friend, President Itamar Franco, to convey to President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, and through him to all the people of Brazil, our admiration and affection for your great country and the people. My warmest greetings to Lucélia Santos, to Betinho, Don Paulo Evaristo, Don Elder Câmara, the conscience of the poor of Brazil and of the world. Your Majesties, this speech belongs to someone else who should be here today. He is an outstanding man of courage, tolerance, and statesmanship. Yet this man is in prison for no crime other than his ideas and vision of peace, freedom, and dignity of his people. From here, I bow to Xanano Guzmão, and through him to my good friend Nino Coni Santana, David Alex, Tahur Matanruak, Fernando Araújo, and all East Timor's prisoners of conscience in jails in East Timor and Indonesia. I bow to the thousands of victims of torture, widows and orphans. I bow to the memory of Nicolau Lobato, Sabalai, and the thousands of our dead. The East Timorese are not the exclusive victims of the Indonesian New Order regime installed in 1965. For more than 30 years, the Indonesian people have known massacres, imprisonment, torture, ban on writers, journalists, academics, and labor leaders. Muslims, Catholics, Buddhists, Hindus have all known their share of repression. The only non-discriminatory policy of the New Order regime is when it comes to repression. I pay tribute to the many tens of thousands of Indonesians who died in their own struggle for freedom and democracy, who languished in the jails of the New Order, or were forced into exile in China, USSR, and Western Europe. I met many of them over the years and shared long hours of conversation about our two people's suffering and dreams. The lessons of the Jewish Holocaust. In 1939, a few months before the outbreak of World War II, Harry Truman read a passionate message from President Roosevelt to the so-called National Meeting for Moral Rearmament held in Washington. The same time as the conference delegates were listening and applauding President Roosevelt's moral speech, 900 Jewish refugees on a boat from Germany, anchored off Florida, were waiting for a decision from Washington as to whether they should find sanctuary in the U.S. or be sent back. Finally, word came that their application for refugee status had been denied. The desperate refugees did not convince the morally courageous delegates to the National Meeting for Moral Rearmament that they had a valid fear of persecution. The 900 men, women, and children were sent back to Germany. Many ended up in Hitler's death camps. Opinion makers and the leaders, academics, writers, and journalists who pretend to be objective and neutral in the face of racism and discrimination, the rape of small nations by a larger power, the persecution of a weaker people by a ruthless army, must share the guilt. No amount of intellectual arguments will suffice to erase their responsibility. The conflict in East Timor can be traced back to the political context of the Cold War. The invasion of East Timor, which took place on 7 December 1975, was a mere footnote of the Cold War. Thousands of East Timorese who died in the days, weeks, months, and years that followed were mere footnotes to the post-Vietnam and Cold Wars. 1.5 years before these events, in June 1974, I visited Jakarta and met with Foreign Minister Adam Malik of Indonesia. After our third round of talks, Mr. Malik addressed to me a letter which read in part, "The independence of every country is the right of every nation, with no exception for the people of Timor. Whoever will govern in Timor in the future after independence can be assured that the government of Indonesia will always strive to maintain good relations, friendship, and cooperation for the benefit of both countries." These were the words of the Indonesian Foreign Minister. The current boundary of the Indonesian Republic is a product of the Dutch East Indies. West New Guinea was absorbed by the Republic not because of a reasonable historical, cultural, ethnic kinship or geographic continuity. From the Chittagong Hill tracts in Bangladesh to Bougainville, Kurdistan, Sri Lanka, India, Tibet, Chechnya, Ogoni in Nigeria, West Papua, millions of peoples seek to assert their most fundamental rights, and if we attempt to find a common denominator for the problems I have just listed, there is one: the right of peoples to self-determination. However, while self-determination in the decolonization process of the non-self-governing territories almost always led to independence, this is not the case in most conflicts today. The case of Western Sahara and East Timor are the two most salient failures of decolonization. In the case of Western Sahara, the United Nations has allowed itself to be a pawn in the machinations of a minor regional power. The right of the people of East Timor to self-determination is widely recognized. Apart from the former Spanish territory of Western Sahara, East Timor is the largest non-self-governing territory in the United Nations General Assembly decolonization list, which goes back to 1960. The UN General Assembly and the Security Council have adopted a total of 10 resolutions on the question of East Timor, all reaffirming our right to self-determination. The Israeli-Palestinian peace talks and South Africa's transition to democracy give us renewed hope in that they demonstrate that seemingly intractable problems can be resolved if there is political will and vision by all. In this room, there are East Timorese leaders of every persuasion. They came all the way from East Timor, Portugal, and Australia. I speak for all when I say that we are ready to enter into a process of dialogue with the Indonesian authorities under the auspices of the United Nations without preconditions to explore all possible ideas towards a comprehensive settlement of the conflict. The peace proposal of the National Council of Mobile Resistance remains valid as a modest contribution towards finding a solution to the conflict. Phase 1, humanitarian phase. This phase, which will take up to 2 years to be fully implemented, would involve all three parties working with the UN to implement a wide range of confidence-building measures, CBMs, but would not deal with the core of the problem, which is the issue of self-determination. These CBMs must include release of all prisoners, end of torture and summary executions, and a drastic reduction in Indonesian troop presence in the territory. Phase 2, autonomy. Phase 2, lasting between 5 to 10 years, would be a period of genuine political autonomy based on ample powers vested in a local, democratically elected territorial people's assembly. At the end of second phase, the autonomous status of the territory could be extended by mutual accord. Phase 3, self-determination. If all parties agree that Phase 3 should enter into effect immediately, then the UN begins to prepare a referendum on self-determination to determine the final status of East Timor. If, God willing, East Timor becomes independent, allow me, Your Majesties, to share with you our vision for our country's future and our role in the region. East Timor is at the crossroads of three major cultures: Melanesian, Malay-Polynesian, and the Latin Catholic influence, a legacy of almost 500 years of Portuguese colonization. This rich historical and cultural existence places us in a unique position to build bridges of dialogue and cooperation between the peoples of the region. Portugal. East Timor will maintain close ties with Portugal, a country which colonized us for almost half a millennium and has shown an abiding commitment to our right to self-determination. Portugal and East Timor will be most valuable partners for ASEAN in its relations with the European Union, Africa, and Latin America. We will also seek to join the newly created Portuguese language community, CPLP. Australia and the South Pacific. The majority of the East Timorese residents outside the country are in Australia. In spite of our sadness of Australia's role on East Timor, I wish to state here our deepest appreciation to Australia for the hospitality shown to our thousands of refugees on Australian soil. We appreciate the many representations the previous and current governments of Australia have made to impress upon the government of Indonesia regarding the human rights situation in East Timor. ASEAN and the APEC. We are conscious of our geography, which compel us to to coexist with our neighbors in that part of the world. We will seek membership in ASEAN and APEC within days of our independence. We will not have a standing army. For our external security, we will rely on a treaty of neutrality to be guaranteed by the permanent members of the Security Council. We will endeavor with the UN and our neighbors to declare our region and the sea surrounding East Timor a zone of peace and development. Rule of law. We will endeavor to build a strong democratic state based on the rule of law, which must emanate from the will of the people expressed through free and democratic elections. All international human rights treaties will be submitted to the Parliament for ratification. We believe that human rights transcend boundaries and must prevail over state sovereignty. Amnesty and national reconciliation. East Timorese now serving in the Indonesian administration, the security forces and the police should not fear an independent East Timor. They will be invited to stay on. Their full and active involvement in running the country will be necessary to ensure a smooth transition. In August 1975, too many East Timorese died in a brief but violent civil strife. Many more died even after the invasion, because some in the leadership of the movement I belong to took upon themselves the role of judges and executioners. East Timor is relatively a small country, but with an area of almost 90,000 square kilometers, with a population of 700,000, it is at least equal, if not larger, in size and population to more than 40 independent states today. Its potential rich in agricultural goods, meat and fish. It has large reserves of oil, natural gas, marble, manganese. It is estimated that over 100,000 Indonesians are now living in East Timor. Most are poor people, and they came to our country looking for a better life. Indonesian migrants will be welcome to stay. The Suharto regime, its achievements, and what it should do. No one can honestly suggest that the 30-year regime of General Suharto has not done good for Indonesia. The record of the past 20 years has been impressive. President Suharto can show leadership by releasing all prisoners, meeting Indonesia's greatest living author, Pramudia Anantatur, Megawati Soekarno Putri, leader of PDI, daughter of Indonesia's founding father, the late Bung Karno. He should release Mukhtar Pakpahan, Indonesia's Lech Walesa. He should talk to Sri Bintang Pramukas. He should talk to George Adicondro, Indonesia's most decorated. He should talk and listen to the wise and most respected Muslim scholar of Indonesia, Abdul Rahman Wahid. The leaders and militants of the PRD are among the best children of Indonesia. Instead of hunting them, he should invite them to his palace for dialogue about Indonesia's future. The next 2 to 3 years will witness a transition in Indonesia. Australia, New Zealand, the US, Canada, and the European Union can encourage a peaceful, evolutionary transition with a discreet yet firm policy of pushing for democratic reforms and rule of law in Indonesia, and for a genuine act of self-determination in East Timor. The US administration is the only major power that has adopted some concrete measures to encourage change in Indonesia and East Timor. I express here our sincere appreciation to President Clinton for his actions on East Timor, and I appeal to him to lend his youthful energy and compassion towards a permanent resolution of the conflict, which he once described as unconscionable. We are not asking that Indonesia be punished with comprehensive economic sanctions. We believe that economic engagement with a country can at times foster positive changes through the development of a democratically conscious society. However, we find it repulsive that the Western countries that more loudly make rhetorical speeches about human rights are the ones that manufacture most weapons that have killed more than 20 million people in the developing world since World War II. Landmines, torture equipment, cluster bombs, chemical weapons are designed to inflict pain and death on human beings. Most are civilians, women and children. Human rights and Asian values. The peoples of Burma, Thailand, the Philippines, South Korea, and the democracy movements in China and Indonesia are telling the rest of the world that democracy and human rights are not an invention of the West. The thousands of Asians who died in the streets of Manila, Bangkok, Jakarta, Rangoon, Beijing did not die for a so-called Asian value that denies the people of Asia the basic and fundamental freedoms enjoyed in Europe, Latin America, and in an increasing number of countries in Africa. South Korea. The brave people of Korea who endured decades of dictatorship and occupation won the struggle for democracy not with guns, but with their tenacity in fighting the troops in the streets of Seoul and Gwangju. However, the brave people of Korea should set the example by commuting the death sentence on former President Chun Do-hwan. From here, I appeal to my Korean friends not to exact revenge against those who have been defeated. Burma. I extend our most heartfelt solidarity to the people of Burma and their elected leader, Nobel Peace Laureate Do Aung San Suu Kyi, in their struggle for democracy, rule of law, and human rights. At a time when some ASEAN rulers are conniving with the FLORC regime to deny the people of Burma their democratic victory, we must all stand up and redouble our effort to restore democracy to Burma. The United States and the European Union must be commended for their leadership in support of the restoration of democracy in Burma, but they must escalate the pressure with additional diplomatic and economic sanctions against the FLORC. It is with admiration for China that I appeal to the Chinese leaders to listen to their own people's opinions and desires for a more open society, based on the rule of law, democracy, freedom of speech. These are, after all, rights that are granted to each Chinese citizen by their own constitution. Wei Jinzhen is one of China's best child. He's been wasted away when his talents could be best used in the service of his fellow Chinese people and country. China should listen to the voice of peace and moderation of the Tibetan people. For many years, the Tibetan spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, has offered a moderate peace proposal to the Chinese authorities to settle the Tibetan conflict. The prophets of doom. The world has changed dramatically over the past few years, and the theories of irreversibility and the status quo have been discredited by the collapse of the USSR. Who would have thought it possible that the great Armenian people, persecuted for hundreds of years, would regain a country called Armenia? The entire world conspired against the Eritrean people. Two great nations, Israelis and Palestinians, who swore eternal hatred, have shown courage and wisdom and began a painful process of dialogue. In South Africa, former enemies are trying to build their common home. Last but not least, for the prophets of doom, for those in government who counsel us realism, allow me to remind them of a news item on the ever-reliable BBC in 1991 on the story of a Soviet cosmonaut who had gone into space a few months earlier on one of those record-breaking missions in space. When he was blasted off from somewhere in Soviet Union, he carried a passport and a nationality granted to him by the most feared military empire in the world. Once he completed his tour of duty for the pride of the socialist motherland, he prepared the spacecraft for its return voyage to Earth. But he no longer had a country to return to. The mighty empire had ceased to exist. He was forced to circle the Earth a few days longer until people of goodwill on Earth decided to which country he should go to. With this note, I will end with renewed hope that no matter the level of brute force used against us, our dreams will never die. God bless you all. Muito obrigado.
CNN International answers complex questions about our world. Science and Technology Week explores the mysteries of science, from research in space to intriguing discoveries on Earth. Then the CNN Computer Connection gets user-friendly with the latest trends in cyberspace. From